Okay. We're going to move freeway fast today. Yeah. What about Arizona and New Mexico freeway?
My daughter was born in Arizona. I lived there for a while. I refused to drive.
So the midterm is up on Moodle now, but I have some here which I'll hand out after we're done, so that you can see these are already up on Moodle too. So let's get to it. I was looking around in my old papers. So you may have heard me say there's two ways to get high. One is, so that's where the bee, the psychedelic bee, buzzed, ha-ha, right? Take drugs that are natural counterparts of brain and body chemicals. All right, that's the first way, most popular way. If you remember from week 5 supplemental, basically all DNA-based forms of life use this. This is why, for example, if we were going to talk about designer drugs, right? In science fiction, the reason I read science fiction for entertainment is because it predicts trends. You know, like Jules Verne wrote about submarines in, the 19th century. Asimov and others wrote about satellites before we had satellites. Look for trends, right? So Bruce Sterling, who's a cyberpunk writer, basically said, when George Bush won, announced the drug war, he said, look, these cartels have lots of money. They have private airlines, private armies. They could invest in racy new technology. So it's clear, if it's about the money, cheaper drugs, safer to the consumer drugs is where you want to go. So instead of a coca field in Colombia, a vat of gene-tailored bacteria in San Francisco, where they're pumping out neurotransmitters. Because actually drug companies already do this. Just genetically engineer bacteria to manufacture brain chemicals, because they do it anyway, because it's already designed by DNA to do that. That's why, we'll see this. So if you didn't read the supplemental, you should. That wasn't really a suggestion, but I'm being nice today, right? So for example, with a psychedelic, this is like a dial, right? Like a volume dial. So normal consensus reality, normal waking reality, right, is like 3. But an acid is real, or really it's more like 100, but let's just say that it's 10, right? So it turns up the volume on stuff that's already there. So some of what you're seeing on LSD is not necessarily a hallucination. It's actually there, but it's screened out for good reason, to keep you sane. Now, hallucinogenic experience is dependent on set and setting. This is actually pretty old stuff. So the set, your mindset, your emotional set, your physical conditions of your body, and balance. So remember, we've never established what a healthy neurochemical balance is for anyone. People who are insane read neurochemically the same as people who are not. Go figure. And the setting, physical locale, is it safe or threatening? So back in the old hippie trippy days, when we said, okay, don't drop acid without a babysitter, somebody else has done it. Okay, don't drop acid in the middle of a, crowded freeway or something like that. Go out in nature. Mellower trip, rather than, the way we did it, like Pacific Coast Highway rush hour in Malibu. Yeah, okay. Kind of insane. LSD makes you think of things that you would never think of. So I'm driving in the fast lane, right? Don't try this at home. It was young and crazy, 17, and of course invincible, right? So on LSD, you you begin to realize that at 65 miles an hour, the only thing keeping you from a head-on collision is a painted line on the road. Now, you know that without LSD, right? You don't even give it a second thought. Just what's keeping you from a crash is your ability to keep the car between painted lines on the road. Well, okay, what if I'm impaired? And the line, yeah, right, the lines move. Yeah, right. All right, so set and setting. So one of the practices in terms of looking at if you're doing a drug history on somebody, and they say they've used LSD, what were their trips like? Or other psychedelics, including ketamine, mescaline, PCP, whatever. What was their trips like? Because what you're looking for is trauma.
Is mushrooms, I'm almost...
Psilocybin mushrooms is basically the same thing. I'll show you a comparative chart. All right, so the following is from that supplemental file. All right, so the chemical territory. So a drug is a substance that changes the normal functioning of living tissue. Psychoactive drugs affect the mind and emotions by changing the function of neurons. That is, individual nerve cells. Also, there are other drugs like industrial chemicals, pollutants, pesticides, solvents, inhalants. This is the second way to get high, where you are changing the oxygen balance going to the brain. Starve the brain of oxygen, it starts cutting out the least life-threatening functions first, until the last thing to go is your breathing. Okay? The reason helium works to kill you is it's not oxygen. Right? Putting a plastic bag over your head, concentrating helium. Helium by itself isn't lethal, but it's not oxygen. You weren't designed to work on it. So you produce a change of consciousness. This is why huffing glue, huffing gasoline, all those things. Your liver wasn't designed to detox glue or gas or paint. So it winds up being toxic. And the immediate effect is like you're drunk because you've changed the oxygen balance going to the brain. But understand, while some people do this intentionally, other people will absorb this like through their skin. Like especially if you're in a paint booth. So if you know people who do auto body work or work with industrial chemicals or any number of things. This is why meth labs are so dangerous. Food additives can give you an allergic reaction, and an allergic reaction is simply an immune system reaction to a particular chemical. So people may have peanut allergies and stuff like that, but they can also be allergic to artificial dyes, coloring, and other additives that are in food, too. And sugar and salt, of course, have drug effects, too. They do affect your mind and your mood. So these are different types of drugs. All right? So age-controlled drugs, which are basically nicotine and alcohol. Over-the-counter drugs, basically there's no controls on those. Anyone can buy them. And so the illusion is that they're safe, but people can overdose from them, thinking that they're safe, right? Then prescription drugs, RX, from a licensed health practitioner. Then herbal drugs, store-bought, wild-crafted. That means you go out in the woods and, get it yourself, or you gather it yourself. Right? So plants work because they're DNA-based for life forms, and they have drugs in them. And then, of course, the so-called illegal drugs, which, this Controlled Substances Act of 70, Schedules 1 through 5. So these are some of the things that people do consciously to get loaded or that might affect them. So there's a book and also a film, Uppers, Downers, All-Arounders.
Just bought that book.
So central nervous system depressants, alcohol, sedative hypnotics, anxiolytic. We've seen that word before. Anxiety, it basically dissolves fear. Barbiturates, benzodiazepines, rohypnol, or also known as roofies, ketamine, and phencyclidine. Ketamine and phencyclidine are cousins. They're dissociative anesthetics. So if you remember what I told you about side effects, side effects is a marketing term for a natural effect of the drug that you can't make money from. Okay? So ketamine and phencyclidine are dissociative anesthetics that have a psychedelic side effect. Okay? Phencyclidine, PCP, that's what that is. PCP was first used on pregnant women. I'm not making this up.
I would not want to be
Okay, remember, this was, okay, again, think about, this is medicine, Western medicine. This is when we thought pregnancy was a disease. And there were very few women doctors. So a woman who is in labor, labor hurts, she's screaming, freaks out the doctor. Let's give her something for that. PCP. It's a dissociative anesthetic. So works two ways. Stops pain signal, anesthetic, and it's dissociative, which means it's happening to somebody else while you're in labor. Here's the problem. Here's the side effect. It's a psychedelic, which means you're hallucinating. Plus, with some women, you get retrograde amnesia. Retro, before, that means you don't remember the pregnancy. And what is this that I got in my arms now? Where'd this come from? Think that would have an effect on the bonding process?
Just a little.
Mom was given a drug that makes her forget the pregnancy. And what the hell is this? This squirming. All right, so they stopped using it on humans. And then decided we're going to use it as a large animal tranquilizer because, after all, tigers and horses and elephants don't really have minds that we need to worry about, right? But it also made its way as a street drug because the formula got out and people started using it. There are some people that are death heads that actually liked the effect of PCP. And it comes back as an adulterant sometimes. Ketamine's the same thing. It was basically dissociative anesthetic, is a dissociative anesthetic. Prescription drug, use it in operations sometimes, but it's got a psychedelic side effect. So that's how it became a club drug. People were using it on the street in conditions that it wasn't really designed to do. People, describe getting into a K-hole, right? You're in this deep, dark depression or whatever, however, you don't want to move, right? It's an anesthetic. You don't want to move while you're tripping your brains out. So, central nervous system stimulants, amphetamines, methamphetamine being the most potent at that end, cocaine, nicotine, caffeine, theobromine, theophylline, matine. So, caffeine, theobromine, and theophylline, remember, they're the xanthines, the chemical cousins, vegetable-based stimulants. Matine is in yerba mate, another vegetable-based stimulant. Opioids and opioid analgesics. Analgesic means it relieves pain, not by stopping nerve signal, but by changing how your brain feels about pain, how you feel about the pain emotionally. Side effect, it also dampens emotions. So opium, morphine, heroin, methadone, codeine, Darvon, Percodan, Percocet, OxyContin, fentanyl, Demerol, blah, 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 blah. all those. Hallucinogens: LSD, lysergic acid diethylamide, phencyclidine hydrochloride, peyote, which is the raw plant cactus, and mescaline, the active ingredient in it, psilocybin mushrooms, 13 different kinds of those, ibogaine, which is from Africa. It's kind of used in, rituals, but it's also used as a cure for opiate addiction. But you have hallucinations on it, so. But you're cured of smack. Anyway.
That makes sense.
Huh?
It's like a leaf. Like a
Yeah, yeah, haven't heard that. And marijuana, which is in the class by itself, euphoriant, it produces euphoria, which Webster defines as a false sense of well-being.
That's what it says in the Webster Dictionary?
Yeah,
Really?
euphoria is a false sense of well-being. Whatever. Okay. And then, of course, inhalants, as I kind of covered in the last slide. So glue, gas, paint, glade, industrial solvents. Lots of different, and these are household chemicals. So where you will see these being used, especially, is like with little kids. Well, they're not illegal, and they're just sitting around, right? Huffing different things. Me smoking grandma's Lipton tea. All right, anabolic steroids, of course, for performance-enhancing drugs, designer drugs. The first ones we saw were fentanyl analogs, China White, for example, meperidine analogs, that's like Demerol. Also was a street drug, a designer drug, and methamphetamine analogs. An analog is something that's like the original substance, but it's different. And then herbs, of course, whatever, ginseng, mawang, ephedra. So, dosage and potency, these concepts. So more isn't necessarily better with dosage and potency, but dosage is how much active ingredient is there to achieve the therapeutic effect. So in a couple of weeks, we'll do a thing what I call the blind drug test, where you'll see what that is. And when we use the 6 drug examples, the first effect mentioned will be the therapeutic effect on all those drugs that were used in the U.S. pharmacopoeia at one point. They were all legal drugs in their time. Whether they are now or not is open question. But we're teaching you pharmacology. Our drug laws don't follow pharmacology. They don't follow the science. There's politics involved. So dosage is how much active ingredient is there to achieve the therapeutic effect, whatever that is. Potency, how powerful is the effect compared to the dosage? That is, the more powerful or potent the drug, the smaller the dose. So, for example, a shot of distilled spirits is more powerful than a beer, or the same amount of beer. An ounce of 2-point beer is less potent, even though they're both alcohol, than a shot of hard liquor. The shot is more powerful. Okay? OxyContin is more powerful than morphine. More powerful than opium. Right? So, therefore, when you're reading, so Vicodins, Percocets, et cetera, if you notice, there's like 5, 10, 20, whatever it is, all right? Well, lesser, depending on what the drug is, if it's a smaller amount with the same amount of acetaminophen, right, Tylenol, That means it's pretty powerful compared to not only the acetaminophen, but the dosage. So you want to pay attention to those kind of things. Generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, for example, a drop of pure botulinum toxin can kill you. But Botox doesn't kill your muscles, it just paralyzes them. Paralyzes the nerves going to the muscles so that, you know.
So they were talking about healing headaches or getting rid of headaches with Botox.
For migraines. It
Migraines,
works really
yeah.
well.
Yeah.
So what is that doing then? I mean, I didn't know what to say about
Not
it. When
that
my
I'd
son
recommend-
came over to my
yeah.
house talking about it, I'm like, Botox?
Yeah. I don't know.
My sister
No
did
comment.
it,
What do you
and
mean, no
she-
comment?
she got a
No
lot.
comment. I wouldn't recommend it. Because of what Botox is. It's a poison. To get rid of migraines, it kills nerve cells. Or impedes nerve function. I mean, if that works permanently, fine, but at what cost?
Right. Well, see, now I know what to go home and tell him.
Yes, at what cost? And what does the data show?
Do we have to?
Right? Do we have data?
Probably not.
Probably not. Okay? This is one of the things, it's an off-label use, right? Which, doctors do. They might prescribe a drug and say, okay, this originally came out for this, but we found that it works for this. It's an off-label use. Here are the side effects. Take it or not.
How do they even figure that one out?
I don't
Headaches
know.
and wrinkles.
What? The off-label use?
But yeah, especially for, for that one. How do you go from from wrinkles to
A
migraine?
filler.
Yeah, okay,
You know,
so
a filler.
take for example, all right, I mean, these are good questions, all right? So understand, for all drugs have effects. So I'm gonna switch from Botox to use an example I'm more comfortable with, cocaine. Because you've got a slide coming up talking about it. All cane drugs temporarily stop pain nerve action. So the nerves, while the drug is there, stop reporting pain signal. Doesn't affect motion, doesn't affect anything else. Just pain reception. Temporarily. And it wears off. Right? So you go into the dentist, you get shots into your gums, owie, owie, then it's numb, then they can do the root canal or whatever they're doing, but it doesn't stop the sound. Right? Doesn't stop hot and cold, doesn't stop pressure, stops pain. All those hot and cold, pressure, separate nerves that are not affected by the cane drug. Because you want to stop the pain. So yeah, it feels weird, but cool, right? Cocaine, same thing. Used to use it in dentistry, except that in terms of the half-life, i.e., how fast your body processes it, you don't want somebody coming off of the cocaine in 15 minutes or half an hour. You don't. And you don't want to keep administering cocaine because it builds up toxic levels, and it kills the patient. Not fun. Right? So, cocaine, it stops pain signal at nerves. But in the brain, different, it produces the effects that it does that are psychoactive. And as you'll see, radio-tagged cocaine goes straight to the brain reward center and is active right there. So basically, what it tells you, what cocaine is basically replicating, is the state that you are in when you achieve something or win something or when you're satisfied, except much stronger, depending on your route of administration. That's why crack can be so insidious. For example, crack babies. It accelerates ovulation. So women can be having sex, get pregnant, not know it, And then it also creates spontaneous abortion. So she thinks she's going to the bathroom and poops out a baby, and the maternal instinct has been suppressed because she just wants the next hit, leaves baby in the toilet. That's not anti-drug. That actually happens. It's explained by how powerful the drug is to override certain emotions by buzzing out the brain reward center. Extreme example, all right? So Botox stops nerve action, right? That's get rid of your wrinkles and all the other kind of stuff, but your face is frozen because those muscles are paralyzed. That's how it works. That's how it kills you. Nicotine, same thing. Very potent, but takes a small amount at a therapeutic dose, a diluted dose, and it has a different effect. Eating a tobacco salad will kill you.
Tobacco salad.
I'm being facetious, but there's enough nicotine in a tobacco salad to kill you. Like eating a cigarette or don't try this at home. Don't eat a cigar. I mean, you wouldn't do it. I'm just saying, this is how much of the drug is in there to kill you. They use nicotine as an insecticide. A drop of pure nicotine on your skin will kill you. But smoking it means that most of it's going up in the smoke, and there's just enough of the dose of nicotine to stimulate your acetylcholine receptors without killing you. But obviously, cumulatively, it takes 20 years to develop a fatal cancer from the smoke, right? So it's not a vitamin. And with respect to pregnancy, because this is another thing we haven't dealt with, but because of the physiology, whatever mom does, baby does at least twice to 10 times as much. And baby doesn't have a liver. It's mom's liver that's filtering the blood. So baby stays higher longer, and depending on what stage of development and what mom is using at, this ain't great.
Is that why they have like moms who use like heroin, for instance, up until like their 8th or 9th month, where they keep them on methadone and then ask them to breastfeed afterwards?
Right. Because they don't want mom going cold turkey, because baby's going to go cold turkey and it could kill baby.
Okay. So why do they have them continue to like breastfeed afterwards, even though like they put the babies, like after they're born, they put them on morphine?
Yeah.
And then they still have them breastfeed even though it doesn't make
Nutrients,
sense to me.
etc.
Okay.
But there's not enough of the stuff that they get you off in the morphine.
Well, there's metabolites you're getting in breast milk and all that other kind of stuff. So it's eventually what you want to do is titrate baby off of the opiates.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
we do, but it's never really made sense
Yeah.
to me. I just know that that's how it's supposed to do.
Right. Okay? There's a medical protocol. So you want to step baby down rather than go
titrate
cold
up.
turkey.
Yeah.
Titrate.
Now, is that the same on like methamphetamines?
Same thing. Right. But methamphetamine so this is prenatal. That's why prenatal is a whole other course. This is why this is the basic. Because it gets more complicated to get certified.
But the effects of heroin on a baby that's not born yet is totally different than methamphetamine, though, right?
Yes. Methamphetamine's way more toxic.
Way more toxic?
Oh, yeah.
We have a harder time with our babies that are coming
Yeah.
off of meth than we do with our heroin babies.
Yeah. It's because of what's in the drug and how the drug is made. It makes it more toxic. Well, I'll show you with cocaine, for example. So, pharmacology, this is in the midterm. Science and study of drugs. Pharmaceutics, making drugs suitable for entrance into the body, so whether it's powders, liquids, gases, tablets, capsules, suppositories, lotions, ointments, patches, pharmaceutics. So, for example, meperidine, also known as Demerol, they're either in tabs, syrup, or injectable. Crack and ice are basically smokable forms of cocaine and methamphetamine, respectively. Pharmacokinetics is basically how the drugs are, how and where the drugs are absorbed in the body, distribution throughout the body, and the effects when it's distributed throughout the body. So this is where your side effects come in. Side effects, remember, it's a marketing term. All the effects are effects of the drug, but how it affects different parts of the body differently. And then metabolism, that's how the liver breaks them down, and then excretion, like do you pee them out, do you poop them out, do you sweat it out, all those, you know, and then the liver. And how it gets into the liver for breakdown and absorption. So let's see, where is that? All right. And like I said, this is all up in Moodle anyway, right now. So absorption, local or systemic, for example. So I told you this already. Cane drugs are local anesthetics, block pain signals at the site of administration. So procaine, benzocaine, cocaine, lidocaine. Absorption depends on the chemical properties of the drug and the site and method of administration. So remember, there's 3 routes into the body: enteral, through the mouth and gastrointestinal tract, parenteral, everywhere else, mucous membranes, and also inhaled, injected through the skin. So enteral and parenteral. Enteral is oral or suppositories. Parenteral is everything else. Yeah.
Do procaine and benzocaine have the same effects on the pleasure center?
Different potency. Well, they're not as active. They're more about stopping pain signal at the site. Nobody really does them as, they're not as psychoactive, and they're less toxic than coke, which is why they're used in dentistry and medicine. So distribution, act locally or at specific sites, so directly into blood or enters blood through the GI and then is metabolized by the liver. So remember the other day when I said the absorption depends on the chemical properties of the drug, whether it's an acid or a base. Salicylic acid is aspirin, oral. You don't grind it up and snort it. People do, causes nosebleeds. Remember that? Self-injury, right? Cocaine hydrochloride, you sniff it, or you smoke it because it's going through mucous membranes in the lungs, or you inject it. Heroin, inject it. Meth, inject it or smoke it or snort it. Okay, so there's reasons why people do drugs the way they do, because of the chemical properties of the drug. Okay, and then once the liver breaks it down, it's metabolized by the liver, and it's these metabolites that are detected by drug testing. So, for example, metabolism. The liver metabolizes all drugs. So routes of administration can change effective dosages. So, for example, the drug Inderol, which is a beta blocker, orally is 40 to 160 milligrams, but parenterally, that is injecting, a push, it's 1 to 2. Orally, it's broken down, less of the drug. Do the push, all of the drug immediately distributed.
So why do most people switch from like smoking or snorting to injection? Some of the people that I've seen, with years of
right.
drug abuse, they always seem to fall under the IV use.
Yeah. Experientially, they feel more of the rush shooting up.
So it's the first initial?
First initial and then afterwards, too. There's a whole ritual shall we say, a ceremonial chemistry, to quote Thomas Zaz from the 50s. Because he basically said, look, he was basically saying this in the 50s. Part of what makes a drug addicting is what you do, not only to get it, but the ritual you use in taking it. That reinforces part of your identity. Right? So there may be a functional limit to how much you can smoke, but if you want to get more and more into your system, you do a push. That is, you shoot. That's one explanation from the science. Other people will say different things, but. So, eating cannabis, for example, is more effective therapeutically for pain control than smoking it. Obviously, more to absorb and longer and slower absorption when you eat it than you smoke it. Nobody seriously suggests that administering a drug by smoking it, where most of the drug is destroyed, is medical. So that's why it can't be smoke more buds being medical. But you can do oral preparations if you're doing certain things like eating. Longer drug effect, slower absorption. Okay, excretion, and again, after breakdown by liver, drugs are excreted in the urine, feces, and skin, and respiration. All right, so neurochemical words. There are 80 plus neurotransmitters that we've identified since we first identified the first one in 1971, which was opiates. Marijuana was discovered in 91. So I'm only going to give you 10 out of the 80 because they're most clearly correlated with drugs of abuse. Okay, so serotonin basically deals with arousal, level of arousal, data flow, body temperature, and sleep. Dopamine, pleasure, memory, brain reward. Endorphin, emotional pain relief, not stopping a pain signal, you just don't care about the pain. And orgasm. Norepinephrine, the fight or flight response. If you're a trekker, Starship Enterprise goes on red alert, shields up, block phasers. Target weapons. Get ready to fight or flight. Acetylcholine, it's both inhibitory and excitatory. That is, inhibitory means, for example, the nerves that I use to raise my arm. Excitatory, the nerves that I use to relax my arm. Inhibitory, excitatory, inhibitory. Different set of nerves. Acetylcholine works on both. All the cholines that are neurotransmitters, and acetylcholine is one of them, all of the cholines deal with the nerve to muscle interface. So they're involved with movement. I believe, I may be wrong, but I'm fairly sure that botulism, Botox toxin, inhibits cholines. So you paralyze the muscle. Anandamide, pain, coordination, memory, and sensation.
So let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
Okay, so if somebody was using Botox
Yeah.
to cure their headaches and it
Right.
was killing the nerve damage,
Yeah.
and if there was a reason for the headache, like some health reason that was going on that you didn't know about, and that was a symptom of that problem, and you're killing that,
Yeah.
then you don't know you have the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just making sure I got that, okay?
Right.
But they're usually just scheduled for people that deal with migraines like all the time. I mean, like my sister-in-law who did it, she was in her bed like 20 days a week. So it's like, it was worth it to kill some nerves. I mean, like, you can still live. So.
Yeah, I mean, I have relatives that have, you know, migraines, but that, you know, they have medical marijuana cards for that, and they get some degree of relief, not always. So.
Interesting.
Phenylethylamine, beta-phenylethylamine, that butterflies in the stomach feeling when you're falling in love. It's a neurotransmitter. Testosterone. So both male and female do testosterone and estrogen. It does different things in our phenotypes, our varying phenotypes, but we all make them. And then GABA, which is probably one of the most of the neurochemical synapses in the brain are GABA receptors. Okay, so these are neurochemical words. So if you think of them like words, depending on how they are used, where they are used, and who's using them cell to cell. Okay, so we called them neurochemicals or neurotransmitters because we used to think that they were only made to communicate between nerve cells in the nervous system. What we found out is lots of cells make these chemicals, like white blood cells, to communicate, you know, there's bacteria here, we're going after them, boom, attack. Or in your colon, or in your stomach, or wherever. So it's not just in the nervous system, it's in also target organs that the nervous system controls, which is pretty much everything. Right? So we'll say it's neurochemicals. So they're like words, depending on who uses them where, and different words do multiple duty. It can mean the same thing, different contexts in terms of interpretation. Right? So neurochemicals and drugs. So serotonin, LSD, mushrooms, psychedelic mushrooms, SSRIs, that is serum, serotonin, reuptake inhibitors, Prozac, Paxil, etc. Dopamine, cocaine, endorphins, so the opiates, opium, morphine, heroin, Demerol, fentanyl, etc. Norepinephrine, methamphetamine, ecstasy, MMDA, mescaline, Effexor. Let's see. One we talked about was Tony Soprano, Cymbalta, which was an SSNRI, so it was also norepinephrine as well as serotonin simultaneously. Acetylcholine, nicotine. So basically what's happening with nicotine, beside it being a poison, is that it's stimulating both, it's relaxing you, and at the same time, since it's not putting you to sleep, it's stimulating you. So yeah, people who worship the nicotine god, yes, they are being relaxed and they are also being stimulated at the same time. Anandamide in marijuana and chocolate. Phenylethylamine, chocolate. Look, there's reasons why people like chocolate and why with certain genomes in the combination, like with women, okay, this is like Prozac. I mean, they've described it like that to me. Hello? Right, there's a reason this is working.
I'd rather eat a box of chocolates than a box of Prozac.
I'm saying. Testosterone. So basically anabolic steroids and estrogen replacement therapy, for example, in menopause. And GABA, which is affected by alcohol, GHB, which is a date rape drug, and volatile inhalants, glue, gases, paints, stuff like that. So you can see why I limited it to 10, because this covers a lot of territory. Obviously, even though we've never set what a healthy chemical balance is, using one or more of these affects the levels of the others. And in the continued presence of using these or using an analog of these, your body ceases making it because it's trying to compensate for the overabundance of the chemical. And this is where essentially what happens with tolerance and then withdrawal. Withdrawal is, wait, we haven't made enough of this? Oh, we got to get back to normal. How do we do that? So as an example, brain's chemical on the left, anandamide, and then the drug THC. So you can see they're not identical. THC is actually more complicated. So the brain chemical slots into what we call receptor sites. It's not exactly like a lock and key. It is actually more like they get in proximity and they dance together. But it's actually easier to visualize lock and key. But the actual relationship isn't lock and key because it's not physical. It's a proximity quantum interaction. But we do talk about receptor sites. So as an example, of course, cannabis sativa does not make THC to get you stoned. That's not its intention. It makes cannabinoids as a defense against fungus and mold in tropical areas. And particularly what it wants to do because of mold and fungus, when it's wet and damp and hot, it wants to protect itself from the sun, so THC takes the form of crystals that reflect light and also physically protect the vulnerable parts of the leaves, seeds, and flowers. Now, where sensimilla came from is, okay, let's keep the plant from seeding so that it concentrates all the THC into the flowers, i.e. the bud. All right? And then let's simulate it being in a tropical area and use hot lights and all that other kind of stuff and do genetic manipulation so it's producing more and more THC and yada, 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 right? So, leaves protecting leaves, flower, and seeds, and it resembles a neurotransmitter anandamide. So one example, strictly speaking, there are no THC receptors, there are anandamide receptors, and THC is actually bigger molecule than anandamide, so it actually doesn't slot into the anandamide receptors. What it actually does is lodge in the cell wall. And when that happens, it actually, one theory is that it renders the cell wall unable to take in nutrients, causing, depending on what the cell is, an up to 33% loss of efficiency, which if that's a stomach acid cell, that you might not notice that, but if it's memory, you might notice that. I've had clients that, so, in the drug scare days, not that we're out of those, but, we kind of dispelled some of that with science. There was a finding that showed that since marijuana smoking dropped testosterone production in males to the low end of normal. So the anti-drug folks would basically say, oh, well, then that will make guys grow breasts. Well, that clearly wasn't happening, but I have seen people who, while they were smoking, didn't grow a beard. And didn't start growing a beard, until they stopped smoking at like 23. Which means, okay, that's a profound effect. Well, do we know what that means long term? No. And people think, well, not growing a beard, so what? You're messing with the hormonal system during puberty while you're still growing. Who knows what the long-term impacts are going to be? Oh, no big deal. Let's see.
So is this in your lungs right here? Is that, this
This
in
is
your brain?
all cells. And this is not just your lungs. This is nervous system.
So the THC goes into all of that.
It's not just the nervous system, though. THC as a molecule is lipophilic. Lipo meaning fat. It likes fat. But fat is not just in fat cells. All high metabolism organs, heart, lungs, brain, nerve cells, ovaries, testes, have fat around them to protect them. Nerves have a lining of myelin as well as fat around them. THC loves that.
So it goes into all of that.
All of that. It concentrates. That's why it would take, that's why it at least takes a month to excrete it.
So the more fat you have on the body, the longer it takes for the drug to get out?
It can be. I mean, there's individual variability, right? So generically speaking, we'll say there's 4 half-life periods for drugs. THC is 7 days, which means 28 days to clear. Right? But I've seen people who absolutely not smoked and took 6 months to clear. And they were skinny.
What would cause something like that?
Don't know. We don't study illegal drugs, right? Right? All we're interested in treatment is whether, in the drug test, if the numerator is dropping so that we can tell they're not using.
Yeah.
Right? That's all we're tracking.
That's what we do, yeah.
That's how we do it. You know what I'm talking about?
It makes sense to study it though, so we know these answers.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Decriminalize it, study it, so we know what's going on.
Okay, so it connects into your nerves and stuff, right?
So you naturally make anandamide, right? But the amount needed, because it's so potent, is very small to achieve the effects that it does. So when you smoke, you're doing an overdose of anandamide analog. And you're smoking way more than you can get away from because THC is not anandamide. So anandamide is broken down by your body. THC is essentially treated like a waste product. And so it just builds up. And it takes a while to clear it. And that's why you have to stop smoking for it to clear.
Okay, but I'm saying we're entered into your tissue and stuff. You're saying it could have caused damage to that tissue is why.
All we can say at the moment without studying it is it seems to it lodges in cell walls because fat's in cell walls too.
Right.
In addition, whether they're fat cells or not.
Right.
Right? So the chemical fat is everywhere and it concentrates particularly in high traffic, high metabolism organs. Right? So it's all over. And you're saturating it and saturating. So it's like osmosis. It doesn't clear until you stop using.
So it just slows everything down, doesn't kill anything?
As far as we can tell, it doesn't kill anything.
Just makes it kind of slow.
But, yeah, it can make you kind of slow, right? I mean, you forget things or whatever.
Refrigerator doors open.
Any number of things, right? And so you can tolerate to it, and especially if you get used to your behavioral tolerance. If you're stoned all the time, then you learn how to function.
But you can do that with any drug, can't you?
You can do that with any drug. That's why I was talking about high-performance drug users.
Comes second nature.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, right. There is. I knew mathematical geniuses that were stoners. Like, that didn't help me. But I was into the science, so it enhances. So marijuana is like the mirror that magnifies. If you have a psychological tendency or an interest, you will be fascinated by it and you will amplify that interest. Conversely, if you're bored by something, or if something involves like doing something that you don't like, it will amplify you not liking it and you'll procrastinate.
Interesting.
Makes sense.
Yeah. But you can compensate, right, by doing it. So this is a brain map, sagittal, that is cut in half. So vision, this is your visual cortex, this is coordination, this is pain center, memory, reward. This reward center is called the nucleus accumbens, judgment, movement, sensation. Okay, those are places that marijuana affects, and that's why you have so many different effects when you get stoned, because it's affecting all those parts in the brain. So this next slide, right? So diverse brain areas: pain perception, balance, coordination, sensory input, movement, judgment. So, like our opiates, while it doesn't stop pain, it enables you to deal with pain emotionally. And since it produces pleasure as part of its effects, it's involved with brain reward too. So therefore, if that happens, it's an addictive drug. Okay, so a section of the THC molecule resembles the anandamide, but there's not an exact match. So if you just notice, so just between this slide and that slide, this is the hypothalamus, this is the nucleus accumbens, which is the reward center, and then all the other brain areas that are, go to slide, please, all the brain areas that are affected by THC, where it concentrates in the brain. I mean, it goes everywhere, but these areas are associated with specific functions. So, because you asked for it, Underground Economy 101 with a little bit of pharmacology. So I'm outlining the basic principles, but the information is subject to change because I've tried to ask DEA for this. Why can't we have spot prices, like the stock market, for stuff, knowing how much something costs? But because we don't, and because I created these like 15 years ago, it's not that we've necessarily had a drop in price. Sometimes we have with some things, sometimes not. So, first slide shows, that slide that I just showed you shows where THC was active in the brain. Radio-tagged cocaine shows that it's also active in the nucleus accumbens, the brain reward center, the part in purple there. And it goes specifically to there. So that means it's way more powerful. Okay, coca to crack. Okay, so by way of illustration, specifically with crack, but it also extends this idea to other powder drugs. Heroin and opiates come from opium poppy sap or are synthesized without dealing with the plant extract. Once you know what the chemical formula is, you can create it from scratch. So methamphetamine and amphetamine type stimulants are totally synthesized, but could have come from ephedra because that's why pseudoephedrine. It's the original herb that produced this stimulant effect. Chinese medicine's called ma wang. So, all right. So coca leaf to crack takes 1,000 pounds of leaf to make a pound of cocaine, or, if you will, 500 kilograms basically lead to a half a kilogram of coca base. But converting away from metric into English, 1,000 pounds to make a pound.
So that's like a
So-
huge field
Yeah,
to make a.
it's a lot.
My math teacher was using all of those terms for math today.
Yeah. So depending on where the drug is produced, if the source country is on the metric system, which is basically everybody except us, then it's measured in kilograms and grams and all that kind of stuff. If the source country is here, we do it in English and pounds. Can be confusing, but one of the things you can test for with clients is their ability to do specific metric to English conversions. They know how many grams are in an ounce. That's a test. How do you know that? And they don't know any other math, but they can do that? Yeah, okay. All right, so 1,000 pounds of coca leaf is like 6 of these tables put together. And about this high. All right, so what you do is you take benzene, kerosene, ether, sulfuric acid, and other chemicals. You pour that on the raw leaf. That makes coca base. Raw coca base, which is like 90% plus pure. All right? So when I was talking about the cut, all right? So let's say this is pure. Powder basically translates 1-to-1 from base, coca base. All right? So the cut. Milk sugar, procaine, because this is cocaine. You want to cut it with another cane drug. That's less potent, but it stretches the amount. Flour, talc, that would be toxic. Detergent, amphetamines, another stimulant, which may be white. PCP, has happened. Some white powder. Okay? There could be at least 5 steps from this level to the street. And all of them might step on it with whatever they're stepping it with, right? So you don't know. By the time you get to the street, you might have, it has gone from 90% pure to less than 15. Still will get you off. Okay? So hence this graphic here where you're starting to get more and more cut. In the 70s, freebase. Cocaine is cocaine hydrochloride. So if you take the base part off, chemically, the hydrochloride, what you do is lower the melting point of the drug. What that means is it's smokable. Now, the old freebase, you needed a torch to light it, right? And the old freebase, so the Richard Pryor effect, right? You use ether to separate out the base, but if you hit that with a torch, it'll explode if you don't get all the ether out. So somewhere in the 80s, they've credited a number of people with doing it, but they found a way, the water method, basically since this has been on television, I've met 6-year-olds that knew how to do this. I'm just going to tell you, take powder cocaine, boil it in water with baking soda. The result is crack. You've separated out the base. The melting point can be reached with a Bic lighter. Since it's baking soda, no explosion. All right? So, freebase is pure, but, the Richard Pryor effect, that's what I'm talking about. 1984, the dirty method, which is basically water and baking soda. Slightly fewer impurities. It depends on what's in the cut. It doesn't take out the impurities in the cut. It just separates the base from the cocaine, making it easier to smoke. Right? So by itself, cocaine is toxic. Damages the heart, lungs, blood vessels. Impurities, if they're smoked, they're even more toxic, depending on what's in the cut. Right? So basically, a gram of powder is like, say, $100. And a crack vial, so 1 1/10 of a gram, or 1/15 of a gram can be $10 to $25, $50, depending. This is the old Portland or Eugene price back in the 90s. So whatever it is now, within $10 or something like that, or whatever it is, right? So cocaine and other powder drugs. So kilogram, 1,000 grams, 2.2 pounds, depending on quantity. So multiple, obviously there's a discount for multiple pounds. Single pounds depends on where you are. So Portland police, reported, say, if you were an executive type, you could, spend $45,000 for a key. Others might spend 20, 10, depends on where you are and how much cocaine is available. An ounce is 2,000 to 3,000 for pharmaceutical, because there's pharmaceutical cocaine that's available, that's diverted, right? So an ounce, 28.35 grams, an eighth of an ounce, 3.5 grams, 8-ball, which is what an 8-ball is, so that's $300 to $500, depending. Grams of coke, roughly about $100. And then, so this is where the issue about powder cocaine to crack. So every gram could be rocked up and produce 10 to 15 rocks, which you could then sell essentially, So the issue is half a key of powder cocaine is way more dangerous than an ounce of crack, because you can make more crack and it's more dangerous than an ounce of crack, right? Because you can baking soda and water, right? So they changed the laws because most of the people that had kilograms of cocaine were white and the people who were selling crack were black, so let's give the black people longer sentences. The Obama administration has basically been looking at changing that, but it's another one of the examples of the laws not necessarily making common sense. Half a key is more dangerous than an ounce, a gram, of crack. So, underground economy, in terms of domestically produced marijuana and other agricultural products, whether it's mushrooms or marijuana, pounds measured in 16 ounces, anywhere from $8,000 to $5,000, depending on whether it's mushrooms or marijuana, and depending on where you are, quantities and all that kind of stuff. Ounces, again, heard of ounces of marijuana going from 250 to 275, up to 500, depending on who you are, where you are, what the quality is, all that kind of stuff. So when we talk about like white dope, meth, coke, heroin, while those things aren't produced domestically and heroin or meth are not always white, the terms are basically used for injectable drugs. Reprocessed domestically into smokable forms, if not imported that way. And so the example here is crack, but basically crack is to cocaine what ice is to methamphetamine, and there's smokable heroin now, too. Now, even though the reason I have a pipe and needle, and despite our earlier discussion, medically speaking, if a client is smoking white dope, that's the same as shooting. The medical protocol is inpatient treatment. That ain't changed. Now, whether they actually go through inpatient is a whole other question, but that's the medical protocol. So, smoking white dope is the same as shooting. We did a great job of scaring people away from needles sometimes, so they think that it was safer to smoke. No, it ain't. You can OD from smoking heroin. So, resiliency. since I mentioned that, I found the original, so a resilient child or a resilient person. So that Frederick Douglass line about it's easier to build strong children than repair broken adults. Okay, so here's how you build stronger children. The resilient child starts with 4 broad factors in the literature: social competence. That means they're responsive, they're flexible, they have empathy or caring, they have communication skills, they have a sense of humor, problem-solving skills, that is the ability to think abstractively and reflectively, that is, what's the situation that I'm not in now? What would I do if I were doing that? What have I done in the past that affects me now? Flexibility, resourcefulness, autonomy, which is the one that I quoted you, the ability to separate from a particular situation, adaptive distancing, that is, I'm not going to grow up like this, having self-esteem and self-efficacy, control of your environment, self-discipline, and then a sense of purpose and future, goal-directedness, achievement motivation, emotional aspirations, healthy expectancies, I expect good things to happen, persistence, if the good things don't happen, I'm going to persist even if it's difficult, hopefulness, that is learned optimism rather than learned helplessness, a bright, compelling future to live for, coherence, meaningfulness, and a sense of spirituality, not necessarily religion, that gives you a sense of coherence in hard times. Now, if this is built into a child, then they can weather all kinds of situations. And sometimes this develops in a toxic environment with no intervention at all. So it's innate. It's in all of us. But if this didn't happen in childhood, we often have to rebuild it in the adult, which is harder. Not impossible, but it's harder. So in this literature, there's 3 domains, because this is school-based literature, 3 domains that affected the resilient child. Family is the first one the child encounters, however, whatever form that is. School is the next one, and then community. So each one of those domains, whether it's school, family, or community, does the same thing relative to its particular mission. So give caring and support, high expectations, and opportunities for participation, that is, building certain skills that build resiliency. And so this is a printout of how caring, support, opportunities, participation, and high expectations play out in each one of those domains. And so, for example, so Kathy, who I will tell you about a couple of weeks in terms of practice, she was the West Side Crip whose parents were junkies, whose school told her she might as well drop out and go on welfare because she wasn't going to complete high school, therefore she wasn't going to get a job, et cetera, et cetera. So, well, that doesn't look like a viable economic alternative. Let me sell PCP. Okay? So family failed her. School failed her. Only the community, which had an agency, which had me, not that it was me, but I'm saying that the basic message is only one of those domains has to work to produce a resilient child. Ideally, you want all of them working together, but only one of them has to work. In my case, my family said, okay, you need to negotiate a hostile school environment and sometimes a hostile community environment. You are black, you're going to college. You're going to read at a college level when you're 13. And we will make sure, and we will have the books and support you in doing that. You'll be able to balance your checkbook. Doesn't mean I like balancing my checkbook, but et cetera, right? 2 minutes, thank you. Copy that. All right, so this last one, go to slide if you would. So, cultures that teach members about how, when, what, and whether regarding spirituality, sexuality, the use of power, have less problems than those who simply forbid certain activities. So, the idea is that skill building is better than prohibition or not talking about something. That's what we've learned from the resiliency literature. So if we teach people the skills that they will need before they need them, they don't develop the problems. And if the family or the school doesn't give that to them, then it's up to the community, however you define community, to do that.
Are these on Moodle, these last couple of
Yeah,
slides?
everything's on Moodle at the moment. All right. Let's see. Yeah, we'll take up more of this next weekend, but basically what's here in Moodle is also will give you the five cultural views of addiction. 2. So pay attention to that. All right, here's the midterm. You will return this either to my office or electronically in 1 week. 5 o'clock, Thursday. Okay, you don't have to wait till Thursday. So, see you Tuesday.
Lane Online. Learn, unlearn, relearn.